Hi and welcome to this discussion of IP&TV World Forum 2012. The event is just coming to an end and I've got a chance to reflect on where the industry is at this year with two distinguished colleagues from the industry. I'm Nick Thomas, I'm a Principal Analyst at Informa Telecoms Media and my two colleagues are going to introduce themselves.
So hi, I'm Simon Frost, I'm Head of TV Marketing for Ericsson.
My name is Joe Ambeault. I work at Verizon. I take care of our media and entertainment products.
Okay, so we've reached the end of a successful event, I think. Where do we think the industry's at now? It would be good if we can identify some of the big topics, the big challenges, the big things that people have been talking about this week, and reflect on where we're at, from maybe a couple of years ago. So maybe Simon, I'll start with you. What do you think the event says about where we're at as an industry right now?
I think the event, in with the branding itself, I think it is transforming itself. It's been a very telco-centric event, and it still is a core event for that telco area. But I think more and more as we're seeing the unification of broadcast networks with IP networks, with those delivery areas, more and more pay TV organisations, if you like, and those sort of infrastructure vendors looking to get into TV services delivered on all screens, and I think that attracts all types of service providers, because literally I think we firmly believe, and I think we were getting a lot of resonance with those that we spoke to in the show, was that multi-screen TV on all devices is not an exclusive proposition for one sector of the market. It's something that everyone wants to participate in.
What I took away was most exciting, and maybe even be a more theme for the last few months, but the tense of the words that people were using. For 15 years, a lot of these topics, interactivity, multi-screen, portability, talked in terms of will, want to, and what was most exciting, from a lot of my conversations and the sessions I attended, a lot of folks were getting to say, have done, I'm about to do, and so really moving from theory and nifty demos to things that are real and in consumers' homes that even 5 years ago, I don't think anyone would have predicted. We've finally pulled off a lot of these tricks.
A lot of us tend to focus on what's just beyond the horizon in terms of when we come to shows like this. But the actuality is now catching up with us, and we're seeing these services launch. Not that there aren't huge challenges still to come, I guess. One of the things that I picked up this week is that maybe thinking about this, that there are three areas to focus on when we look at how the industry is developing. The first is to understand if there's a consumer demand, and I know, Simon, there was a big Ericsson presentation of some of your research on this theme.
Absolutely. So
the consumer demand in place, is the technology readily available? Is it ready? Is it fit for purpose? I think perhaps the key element that I'm also looking at is there a business case? Are the business models in place? So Simon, do you want to pick up on any or all of those?
The latter one, definitely the million-dollar question, of course, and I think maybe if we start, is there consumer desire for next-generation experiences? Are they being influenced by activities or industries outside of TV, which I think we're definitely seeing? So I think consumer expectation, I think, is only going to change and evolve more and more quickly. This is one of the reasons we do our yearly study into what consumers want from video, what they perceive as being quality, what they perceive as being worth paying for, because I think we certainly believe that's going to continue to project. So touching on the technology aspects, then yes, I think there's technologies around that are going to help make things cheaper, make things more efficient, make things more logical, make things simpler to integrate, and I think they're all either on the cusp of standardization or pretty much ready, such as MPEG-Dash or HEVC, for example, high efficiency video coding. So I don't think it's insurmountable now, the technology problem. I think it'll be the monetization aspects, and I think we'll still see some exploration in those areas. People are going to have to try a number of different things out. I think Twitter for me is kind of a good example of the internet era where we'll actually give things a go. We'll try these things out, and a little further down the line, we'll see what monetization opportunities come out of those. So I think surrounding high quality, high value content is going to be some innovation on social aspects, connectivity of experiences, and see what opportunities, what sticks with consumers, and what monetization opportunities then hang around those.
Yeah, Joe, what's your take on those issues?
I think the consumer demand might not even be the right term. It's or maybe what fits underneath it is almost consumer entitlement as I travel around. It's why can I not do this? I should be able to do this. Yep. From more of a desire maybe several years ago. It would be really neat if I could do this thing. And so that's a fairly big shift, which gives great buying signals. I am entitled to this and you should give it to me. Technology has really not been a problem for quite some time. Certainly it's gotten more cost effective, that's pretty standard. Certainly there are more people who know how to manipulate and make it do the tricks. But in my 15 years in this business, most of the tools that were needed to make this go existed, maybe a little more expensive, but fundamentally a lot of the pieces are still here, or were already here. The commercial model aspect, though, I'd also venture to say is actually staring many folks in the face, but maybe not necessarily looking in the right place. I get a lot of inquiries. Fios TV is a pay TV service that Verizon offers over fiber to the prem in the United States. And we've gone very aggressive with interactivity. And multi-screen is in its third, maybe fourth year as part of our value proposition and continuing to grow. And I get a lot of questions of, what's the business model? How did you justify that? Well, interactivity was not about selling more ads or people clicking on social networks and maybe they spend more money because they buy somebody's sweater or a coffee pot off the TV show. For us, we actually took it from a different route. We said, what interactivity is about? It's about self-service. It's about deflecting a call. It's about providing someone an easy way to buy more things from us. And from that, all the nifty play with Twitter and do those other tricks fall out. Multi-screen is very similar. I think the commercial model for multi-screen is very straightforward. Again, staring the pay TV industry straight in the face. You read the headlines, it's doom and gloom for pay TV. Viewers are going elsewhere, the business is over. First of all, the internet would crash if all of pay TV ran across it. So we've got that for a little while longer. But the reality is that multi-screen video we found is increasing engagement. And so we had hoped that it would keep it flat as we read all these headlines and all the research coming out that said it's over, it's the beginning of the end. What we've actually found in the last few years is a very straightforward business model. If we get our customers to spend more time with the service, the ARPU comes up, the churn goes down, business case done. And then everything else becomes bonus round. So if now watching it on your tablet, you can put in a few more commercials, then great, but you don't need to try to prove the business case off of that. So I think maybe we have to stop reaching a little too far and just come back to the core fundamentals of keeping customers, driving up the revenue we're getting from them, and the rest of the pieces become kind of bonus rounds for what are the nifty demos that we see on the floor.
So there's a tendency amongst analysts to spread doom and gloom, and it's a kind of occupational hazard that we do that to justify existence. I'll step out of character at the moment and go off message and say actually the pay TV industry is in a very strong place. There is a strong consumer demand. I think your research confirms that, and that seems to be understood. And as you said, Joe, multi-screen services are really adding value and enhancing the value of pay TV packages for consumers. The real question, I guess, is who's going to deliver those services? Traditional operators, telcos, traditional pay TV operators, satellite cable. I think that's the element that's unclear, whether to what extent, if you like, newcomers will be shaping the way we experience content and what we consider to be TV content.
I mean, I think just like any business that comes under the purview of the power of IP, right, Internet Protocol, in general, what you see is a collapsing of the value chain, just brought out by how it changes distribution. I think if you sat in a meeting with any distributor, they would be sitting there fretting that they were going to be crunched out of the value chain. But the part that they usually probably don't realize is go to the content provider, and other than the people actually operating the camera who produce the piece of art, those whole category of content providers, the HBOs, the Stars, the TNTs, are having those same kind of conversations. So I mean, I think certainly, just like there have been more content providers, there will be more distributors. But the part that I think, in my opinion, that's a little up in the air and could kind of go anyway is there room in the value chain going forward for these two particular levels? And I think we've seen some examples of content providers trying to go direct to consumer and having mixed results and distributors continuing to add value. So that part's pretty unclear to me as to how that goes forward. But I think regardless, consumers, because they've gone from I want it to why aren't you giving it to me, they're gonna get it, and somebody's gonna answer that need.
And also, Simon, I guess just that pick up Joe's theme here about the sense of entitlement consumers have.
Right.
I guess our expectations of what we see on a TV screen are shaped by our expectations of what we expect from a smartphone or a tablet. Instant response, high quality images, the ability to communicate, to interact around content, and that's kind of that's placing the demands on the TV part of the mix, I guess. But just picking up on this in terms of who's going to succeed. We understand there's the demand for paid TV services. What's your sense of how it's going to play out?
I think I firmly believe the future is still incredibly rosy for the service provider, because I think ultimately it's about providing a service, and I think what will be considered that service is only going to evolve. And I think Verizon's been very pioneering in that. I think if we look at the trend right now of talking about the OTT provider and talking about what is happening and cord shaving and the impact on the industry, I think from we see that really, I think if you look at it in an 18-month window, a 2-year window, really it's about something that was a bit different, that had a novelty value, and ultimately it gave consumers choice. But choice to access to a large amount of content in a fairly simple way on a number of devices is not A, rocket science, B, mutually exclusive. So, I think we fundamentally believe that as that expectation grows, and then as you said, pretty much the new hygiene factor becomes, well, why can't I do these things? It's the person that addresses those, and I think we firmly believe that the service provider is there to do that, but also then be the trusted brand, the trusted face of that facility, that service. There's that phone call to that person. When it gets that enriched, the frustration level will be even higher when bits of it don't then logically work. So who's going to solve that problem? And I think that's where the brand of the service provider is its greatest value.
And I think there's some easy winners to predict, though.
Yeah.
Content providers are clearly going to win. In any way, shape, or form this goes forward. More distribution equals a win for the content providers. Consumers on the other end of that, just because they have the wallets, certainly they're going to win, even though copyright is not necessarily a consumer-friendly kind of thing. And I think not necessarily video aggregators or distributors, those balls are definitely up in the air for me, but internet service providers. So you would have to distinguish at the network operators those two lines of business. The internet service providers, again, clearly win, higher engagement on their access product. And so those are, I think, in my mind, pretty easy winners to pick. It's those other two categories, the aggregator, distributor, and how do they go forward.
I think one of the themes that I've picked up this week, again, in terms of actual deals that are now being announced and things that are starting to happen, I think we've seen in the last couple of years, again, probably irresponsible analysts talking about the threat of the OTT players as a direct threat to the traditional service provider. And what we're starting to detect in some of the deals that are coming through is really what seems incredibly logical, which is that the service provider partners with an OTT provider, so that you take your Netflix, your love film from your service provider, your TV provider. There isn't necessarily an opposition there. I just sense that things are being integrated into the mix, because some of those OTT aggregators, as you say, Simon, they don't have customer support. They don't have the billing relationship with end users. It makes perfect sense to extend the proposition from a service provider by collaboration with those OTT aggregators. Is that the way things are? I mean, we always talk about Netflix, and in the way Netflix is an exception because it's really on its own out there. There are other smaller aggregators perhaps that are a fairer example, but is that, in a way, is the traditional pay TV industry taken on board that threat by effectively integrating and collaborating? Is that the way forward?
I think it is a way forward. I think there's a way forward for maybe there's a couple of levels there. I think one is emulation. So in effect, to my point earlier, I think, which is about Netflix perhaps getting popularity or Love Film getting popularity because it was about choice and it was about ease of access, but not necessarily great user experience. Yep. Depending on your broadband pipe and how good it was, because most of us don't still have fantastic broadband enough that we can guarantee that on Saturday you're going to be able to sit down and watch a film uninterrupted by a bit of buffering. So it's still not that beautiful lean-back experience just when you want to be entertained. So I think when consumers place so much emphasis more in the future, we believe, on convenience and we enter more of an experience-centric culture, I think it's going to be that reliability, that quality of that experience is so much more important. I mean, it's a quick sideline, but one of the interviews that we did as part of the Consumer Lab studies, they said, you know, the internet is an experience. The internet is not internet without speed. You know, it's not a thing. I think people of our generation know it as a cloud of computers and networks and wires and routers and stuff, and easy access to content. For I think generations that have grown up not knowing anything else, it's an experience. So it's the quality of that experience. So I think emulation, it's not exclusive to offer these kind of services as the aggregator. I think bringing it into your platform, I mean, to the point that the content owners are going to win, I think if you're making compelling content, and the old adage of content is king, if it is compelling content, you know, today still the highest monetization options for that content is exclusivity, is selling that through an exclusive relationship that the person's prepared to pay a large amount of money for that guarantees a certain amount of eyeballs. So I guess if an OTT provider today has done that, and it makes sense to bring that in through the platform itself as a complementary new aggregator, then perhaps that model will work. But it's be case by case. I don't think anyone's yet started doing it.
I think the answer depends on what kind of network operator you are.
Right.
And where you are in your life cycle. I mean, you know, access business is by far the most profitable, you know, type of service. Maybe some of these B2B cloud services are going to, you know, give it a run for its money, but nowhere on a balance sheet or a P&L does a network operator say, this is my most profitable business, being a video distributor. If they can look at monetizing their network in a different way and reducing liability on long-term content contracts, which in a lot of cases come with guaranteed minimums, but they can also extract value beyond my pipe is being used by providing services to OTT video distributors. So sure, I'll pick up your customer service, but I'm going to charge you a per incident and make a margin on that. Right? It's already a sunk cost. You're already taking calls anyway. You know, I want a bounty for everybody I use my marketing muscle to sign up, or I want a piece of the action every month for somebody I help sign up. It's a very different way, I think, than maybe a lot of folks walking around the floor think about monetizing their networks. But I think it gets them the same effect without maybe necessarily the balance sheet dilution that comes potentially from being especially a smaller scale video distributor. Now, if you're bringing in 7-figure and 8-figure customers, then the math changes. But you know, that was when I was very surprised, has still not really materialized in a very big way, at least in the dialogue at the show, was this sort of alternate model. I get the benefit of the emotional attachment of video that comes with why I wanted to do a triple play, but I don't bring all that horrible baggage of having to hire a brand new gigantic staff, build significant infrastructure that maybe I don't have the full expertise for, and then negotiate these atrocious, painful 10-year content contracts that are billions of dollars a shot.
Well, that's really where my thinking is, there's lots of people have burnt their fingers already in that space. And maybe that's why they're still working through those contracts. But it does seem to be a simpler model where the responsibility, the expertise, the heritage, the legacy, and the hideous negotiations and a large degree of the risk comes from someone else, and that there are other key areas for network operators to monetize. But let me just pick up on another theme that you briefly alluded to, Simon. I know it's one of the big themes we've seen this year is around the influence of social in the TV space. Clearly, you know, the impact of all our end users, the consumers. As consumers, we're still consuming as much, if not more, TV than ever, but we're also spending a lot of time on social networks, and hundreds of millions of us are doing that. So clearly the landscape is changing. And we've had a lot of discussion at this event around social and the role it will have as part, perhaps, of that enhanced experience. Do you want to just address how you see that's progressing? Is there a challenge for the industry, or is it really just an ability to enhance that service by allowing consumers to engage more deeply with the core content?
I think maybe the answer, or the first answer to come back to again, is it was your point earlier about the fact of why can't I? And I think it's an expectation factor. So we saw, again, in the consumer lab research that we were doing, that actually a large amount of people were getting a lot of benefit from interacting socially with a piece of linear content that was on. It's quite difficult to do it with on-demand because not everyone's going to watch it at the same time. So, I mean, and I think the genre of content that lends itself well to that was stuff that you would evaluate. So it was the Bachelors and the X Factors and those sort of material. And it was even, and then when questioned, they would say, "Do you think that content was really great?" And even some of that content was not fantastic, but for them, the experience was better because even though it wasn't great to watch alone, the fact that they were socially interacting with one another on their sort of virtual living room, if you like, whilst this piece of content was on, was additive to their positive experience. So I think it's about how do you integrate that in, and I think we're incredibly early days now for how do you integrate something like that to programming? Will the programmer do that? Will there be an app specifically for the programmer, or will it be a Facebook integration as part of the TV? Will the updates appear on the TV, or will they be on a companion screen? All of that, I think, fairly uncharted territory right now. It's about doing that in the most intuitive and seamless way. And I think, as I said, I think it is early days, but I think it's here to stay. I think it is definitely here to stay. And one thing that particularly excited me from looking at that, and I thought was really interesting, is today, when we think about what we're going to watch, we largely look at a big grid EPG of hundreds of channels of content, or surf a VOD library. There isn't really any recommendation. There isn't really anything that relates to, was that any good? And the other side, the positive side, I think, of this, the social interaction aspect was, yes, you can only interact with a piece of live content, but to initiate a piece of on-demand content can come from the social element itself. So perhaps the fact that you were even on Facebook in the first place, and you had perhaps in the future a TV platform integrated, that you could see your friends had just watched a great movie, the fact that you could then start that movie from that social recommendation rather than start with an EPG might be an interesting element in the future, I think, as well. This sort of almost positive virtuous circle of someone watching something, then recommending something, and you then consuming something.
Joe, is that something you see as well?
So I'll take a few moments it's very rare that a network operator, especially in the internet age, gets something done first before these extremely small and nimble other companies. But Fios TV had the distinction of Facebook and Twitter first anywhere on the planet brought to the TV screen. And I can remember being in Silicon Valley having those conversations with those companies and them saying, "Why would you want to do that? That makes no sense." And we said, well, we don't know exactly yet either, but it seems like there's going to be some value here. So Facebook, at a minimum, it's sharing pictures. The second thing is, well, for all intents and purposes, is a way to promote the content that people are watching. Those seem like good places to start. Twitter, but it was not about replacing your device the primary device, at the time computer and growing mobile and then certainly tablet at this point. It was about adding value to the TV experience, and a complete surprise was we actually had a couple customers who at the time, because this is 2007 I think, didn't even know what Facebook was. They just thought it was a place they got pictures of their family because some other member of their family set them up with it. And so there was also a benefit at that time of driving folks back into those social media and introducing them. But primarily, as we got up and got started, we thought about it basically, social media is just more content. And from a distributor standpoint, it's effectively free content, which is also nice as you're trying to increase the profitability in the business. So I think it's very easy. How it gets done is a different story, but there's no way that any recommendation engine, and I'm very sorry for anybody who builds a recommendation engine, will ever compete with the groupthink, the virtual water cooler. And my happiest day will be the time when I can say, share my preferences, share how I've set my DVR, and then my friend can say, you know what, I trust Joe, he can configure my DVR. Nope, let me mash that up with my cousin Bob and this other guy, and having that interplay happening behind the scenes. But for today, for us, it's primarily a way to add more content. And I mean, I can't go back to watching a presidential address or those award shows. My wife forces me into the Oscars. Now I can actually enjoy it because those tweets that are running along the side are better than most stand-up comedy routines that you can catch anyway. So, but I don't think anyone has the clear answer. I think the good news is you don't have to directly monetize it. It's effectively money, you input into the screen and you're basically done. You're not running huge recurring costs.
No, I was I was watching the first episode of the new series of The Apprentice last night, and I was following it on the tablet on Z-Box, and but effectively following the Twitter stream. But it is very addictive, and we're finding new ways of consuming. Actually, you know, younger users, as your research I'm sure are kind of doing that instinctively, and I'm playing catch up here, showing my age. I suppose, again, I'm sorry, apologise for I'm predisposed to find threats where there is otherwise there is harmony. But I think the interesting thing to me is what role Facebook itself will have. As you say, at the moment it's a kind of bonus because it creates and enhances the content that people see. But as you say, Facebook, although it's not a content company, has thrived through distributing content, primarily social gaming, photos, and so on.
Status?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It's an important form of content. Is there a scenario where TV is shared commonly through Facebook, and Facebook comes to be a big distribution for TV content? Is that something that you see? And who does that threaten if that happens?
Actually, I mean, and I think Google leadership would probably not disagree. I think the real place that the Facebook barrel is aimed at is at what we would sort of today say traditional search.
Yeah.
So I'm fairly certain that mountain is probably the first one to climb. It's much higher margin. It certainly helps improve their advertising business. So I think for a decent amount of time, Twitter and Facebook remain the friend and not move into frenemy even territory. There'll be lots of experimenting, like Warner Brothers has, hey, do you want to buy some titles? But I noticed that there hasn't been any follow-up on results, and now we're several months in, so I don't know what that says about success or not success. But
so thanks both for your contributions. Let's wrap this up now, and I'll ask you both for maybe 3 key themes or takeaways or lessons that you've taken from this year's IP&TV forum. So Simon, what about you?
I think everybody has a right to TV on all devices and TV on all screens, and it's up to us to solve those problems. That I think everybody, all service providers, TV service providers, have their eye on this ball and want to do that. They all have their own different individual challenges for how to unite different types of networks, back offices, platforms, technologies to embrace this new era. So, and I think that's a lot of the conversations we had was how are they achieving that. Part of that, of course, is the challenges then to the existing food chain, the value chain, the business model. But I think ultimately that will sort itself out, and that, you know, overridingly, I think the combination of the agility and the speed and the expectation and almost the experimentation of the internet era is being applied to the TV era. I think we're on the beginning of that, and I think that's it makes perhaps if you're a former TV person, you kind of you have to start thinking a little bit faster speed than you did traditionally. So they're my kind of takeaways, I think.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, I'll say it again. I mean, I'm excited that the tense of the words that everyone is using has finally changed. I mean, to come to another conference and hear yet again about things that will come and the magic that will be, but instead hearing about things that were done and, you know, are in action now is my number 1 and number 2. So I'm going to cheat because, I mean, it's been 15 years kind of waiting for the last several months to really come into play, and never thinking that I would catch American football on my iPad. But, you know, there I was last season in my kitchen, you know, getting the snacks ready to go, and I didn't have to miss a second because it was running on my iPad. That is the most valuable TV content I would maybe not even be off base saying on the planet. Having that show up in a multi-screen experience and not just be talked about anymore in demos. The first demo I did for the NFL multi-screen was in 1999. So to finally, you know, see that come to life is huge. Probably the last one, which was very surprising to me, is as we, you know, sit in our, you know, at our homes, wherever we may find those, you know, the U.S. looking out and saying, man, we're so far behind, and we don't have broadband together, and, you know, they're doing all these great things with multi-screen video and interactive and social and all these other places. And then I come here, and I was introduced today by a moderator from, I want to say Germany, and his comment was, the U.S. is so much further ahead on all of these multi-screen things, and we have, you know, we're at least 2 years behind here in Europe, and You know, my comment at the end of that whole thing was that the world is different and things matter differently, and what's most important is the consumer you have in front of you and what they want and what they feel entitled to in serving it. It's irrelevant what's happening necessarily 3 miles away, whether you're ahead or behind, as long as the person that you're competing with next door, you're ahead of them.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think it's been a really positive event. I'd pick out social as a theme that's really starting, again, rather than being something we talk about as a future, we're starting to see it, some implementations of that. I think recommendations seems like a sort of a side area, but is actually absolutely core to bringing the full value of the catalogues that we're now starting to see offered to consumers. I think there's still a challenge around recommendations, but I think that we're starting to see some movement. And I think the multi-screen, multi-screen has been, again, something that we've talked about for years. We're starting to see it happen. As I think we've said, the technology is kind of getting in place. Still think there's a challenge around business models, but I think that we're seeing some momentum now, and I think that we'd all agree that the pay TV market is in a good place right now.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, gentlemen.
Our pleasure.